Interment will be at Britton Road Cemetery. The family will be gathering for Shiva at 280 Esplanade Drive. Today, Monday, from 7 to 9 p.m. Tomorrow, Tuesday, from 2 to 4 p.m. And then 7 to 9 p.m. for friends to call. If you further wish to honor the memory of Beryl Nusbaum, you may do so by making contributions to Jewish Home Foundation, Temple Beth El, and the Jewish Federation of Greater Rochester. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, ונודה שירביצני על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי ישובב ינחני במקלט צדק למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He has me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He guides me on path of righteousness. He revives my soul for the sake of his glory. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod do comfort me. You set a table inside of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. It is now my honor to call upon Beryl and Joan's children, Dina, Chad, and Mitch, to speak.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dina and I'm Beryl's daughter. There are many things that come to mind when I think about my dad. Here's just a few examples. He was a family man. He put his family before everything. We were the center of his world. His love of family was obvious from family trips to our annual seders to simchas. He loved his kids, but boy, did he love his grandchildren. They could get away with anything and could do no wrong. From giving his grandchildren candy for breakfast to spoiling them rotten, he loved each and every one of them in their special and unique way. His one and true love was my mom, the light of his life. After 66 years, their love and admiration for each other never waned. I've never seen a stronger love between two people. Dad was always rooted in his Jewish beliefs. This was a cornerstone of my childhood and grounded me into adulthood. His involvement in the Jewish community has provided me the necessary building blocks and allowing me to follow in his footsteps, serving my community. Our family was steeped deep in tradition. It brought him such naches as he sent us to Jewish day school, Jewish camps, and shul. His dedication to Judaism and its values has made all of us better people. Don't be fooled. He wasn't always a perfect angel. Like all of us, he had a few faults. My dad definitely had a love of sweets and snacks. His love of dark chocolate M&Ms, burnt pretzels, 7-layer cake, Sugar Bear cereal were some of his favorites. But the most iconic Berylism was drinking Diet Coke with ice in a separate glass. I will miss my dad's smile, his words of wisdom, his love, and especially him introducing me as his baby. Dad, I miss you very much. Thank you for your guidance and teaching me right from wrong. I love you.
Okay. Bulls, bears, and pigs. You have probably heard Beryl say something like that. If you haven't, I'll come back and explain it in a minute. My sister referred to Berylisms. That was one. My father, so let me walk up to this. My father had a very clear view of what's important in life, of his values, and of how the world works and how we work in the world. Yes, he was wise, he was kind, he was generous, and he had high standards. And as I was growing up, he was never shy about reminding his children, and me in particular, of these high standards. And the Berylisms were a big part of how he did it. And in this context, I'm using Berylism to refer to how he put his values into succinct, poetic, folksy life lessons that would teach us. Essentially, they're like morals, just without the fable, kind of like a Cliff's Notes for Aesop. So those of you who know me will not be surprised to hear that as a kid, these words of wisdom drove me absolutely nuts. I didn't want to listen at all. But over the last 40 years or so, I've found them to be hugely valuable. I use them to drive my own son nuts. On the other hand, when I'm channeling Beryl with younger folks at work, they think I'm pretty wise. And so that was a little bit of a gift he gave me there. He gave me these tools to use there. There are too many of these Berylisms to share them all in what I've been told is a brief amount of time that I will speak to you. And there are several that I've been told specifically that I won't discuss here. But I'll review a few of them to illustrate. So back to bulls, bears, and pigs, which was always delivered with an exclamation point. This was always followed.
Just trying to help.
No, that's not working either. Okay. Bulls, right. This was always followed by this exact colorful explanatory text. Bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. Now, sometimes Beryl was a bull. This is market wisdom, of course, for those of you who aren't like me and actually understand these things. Sometimes Beryl was a bull, sometimes Beryl was a bear. In fact, a lot of times he was a bear, but he was never a pig. And so he never got slaughtered. And he was always shrewd, but he was also always generous. But the most important Berylisms, I think, are the ones that are about how we deal with our fellow people, since this is something that is so important to him. And let me start with one that he always attributed to his father, Nusbaum, who was himself a great man of wisdom and kindness. He said, "All people have value, and all people deserve respect." It's corny, but it's right, and it's pithy. In particular, over the past few years, this has been really important to me in my professional life because sometimes some of my coworkers had a differing perspective. The way that I was raised made me really uncomfortable with that. A man is only as good as his word. This was really core to Beryl. Personal integrity was paramount, and I think we're all going to say that because it was so important to him. If he made a commitment, he would always deliver on it. If he said he was going to beat you in court or on the tennis court, he usually did. I'll just give two more of his favorites. Don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind man. This comes from the Bible, and I think it pretty much translates loosely into don't be a jerk, and especially don't be a jerk to people who you can help instead. And I want to close with the one I probably heard the most often, except for the one that I'm not telling you, is you'll catch more bees with honey than you ever will with vinegar. And this one has the colorful corollary that I'm not going to discuss about skunks and certain types of competitions that the skunks are always going to win. Sometimes it's helpful to ask myself, is this a skunk I'm dealing with? Am I being a skunk? And is this conflict worth it? And it's often not. This is my father always telling me to take the high road. And this will lead me to one of my own Berylisms where I say you always want to take the high road. It can be cold and lonely up there, but the view is always better and you'll never regret taking that. So thanks, Dad, for teaching me how to live in this world in a way that I feel good about.
I'm going to try to stay closer to the microphone. But if you can't hear me, let me know, because I do want to be heard today. My mom can't hear me. Oh, how's this? I'm going to do my best to speak up. I've always known there would come a day that I would be standing on this bima giving a eulogy for my father. I have dreaded this moment for many years, mostly because that would mean my dad wouldn't be here with me anymore, but also, in no small measure, because of a deep-seated fear that I could not possibly do justice to my father's life and legacy in a 5-minute speech. But yesterday, as I thought about the words I wanted to share with you all today, I had an epiphany that it was not, in fact, possible to encapsulate the man that Beryl Nusbaum was in such few words. So I decided not to worry about it and just to speak to you from my heart and tell you what my father meant to me, which was everything. And there is no other place I could imagine having this talk than right here in this sanctuary at Temple Bethel, Dad's spiritual home, since this building opened over 60 years ago, in the synagogue where he and Mom were married on August 3rd, 1958. I can practically see him sitting in his regular seat that he sat in every Saturday morning and on my holidays with my grandfather from the day the building opened, the same spot that we grew up sitting as a family for as long as I can remember. That was a big part of our tradition, and tradition was very, very important to Dad. I want to start with my childhood, of which I have so many amazing memories. As a kid, I didn't know my dad was a great man or understand how lucky I was to have him for a father. I just knew that I loved him and loved to be with him as much as possible. He worked extremely hard and instilled that Nusbaum family work ethic in all of us. He led us by example. He expected a lot from himself, and we somehow knew he expected a lot from us too. But he always also saw the best in all of us. As a kid, the best times by far were the weekends, because those were the times that I knew that I would have quality time with my dad, or Pops, as I often called him. Saturday morning started with early trips to the public market and then here to temple for Shabbat morning services with Dad and Grandpa. Sunday mornings were even better. First, we would head over to the office. Dad would get some work done, and we would either help him with menial tasks or roam the halls. Then, we would head over to Grandpa's store at Bull's Head Plaza to visit with Grandpa Shep and several uncles. The store wasn't open Sunday mornings, but there was plenty of work to do to get ready for the week. After that, it was back to Temple, where Dad would have his weekly officers' meetings, and again, I would find myself roaming the halls. In fact, I think Chad and I could still show you pretty much every secret passageway in this building. I was having the time of my life, but all the while, my father's core values, hard work, community, and family, were being reinforced without me knowing it or understanding it. My dad took incredible pride in being a lawyer. To him, it was a truly noble profession, and it was a profession that allowed his best qualities to show through. He joined Woods Oviatt freshly out of law school in 1959. He quickly rose to partner and ultimately managing partner, a role he probably served in for over 25 years. He was a tenacious litigator who fought for his clients with everything he had. He would lead his clients into battle and never would be outprepared by his adversary. As a child, I would listen to him practice for hours in his office at home. It wasn't until I joined the firm years and years later that I learned his nickname was Beryl the Barracuda. Although he may have been feared by his opposing counsel, he was adored by those who worked with him. He took the time to train younger lawyers and to build relationships with everybody at the firm. He loved the firm and the practice of law so much that he actually never retired. In fact, he continued practicing until he passed away this past weekend. About 11 years ago, shortly after my dad turned 80, he planned to retire, and we threw a retirement party for him. He stopped in my office a few weeks before his end date, and he told me he might need a few extra months to clear out his office. I said, "Dad, whatever it takes." Little did I know, those months would last more than a decade. He just never left. And that was because he loved it so much, it had long since ceased being work for him. If you had happened to come by the office just this past week, you would have seen him roaming the halls and having a great time, just like I did when I was a kid. The firm closed our office today in honor of my father, and I am touched beyond words to see all of his colleagues and coworkers here with us today. Dad's work extended far outside the law firm. By the way, I just want to stop and say, Mom, I'm sorry this is longer than you wanted it to be. But I'm up here and there's nothing you could do about it. Dad was a pillar of the Rochester Jewish community, whether at Jewish Federation, at the Finance Committee, or the board, or personnel meetings, or as Temple Beth El president, at Israel Bonds, or at JCC meetings, or working out at the JCC at 5:30 every single morning for his entire adult life. Dad added his insight and advice and warm smile everywhere he went. His roots here in Rochester are deep. The Nusbaum family came here in the 1860s, a fact of which he was extremely, extremely proud. And he cared deeply about Rochester and deeply about the community. But as much as Dad loved his work and as much as he loved the community, his greatest love was his family, and particularly my mom, his wife and partner of over 66 years. Their love affair was truly, I'm not going to look up anymore, was truly the stuff of fairy tales. He literally worshiped the ground that Mom walked on. I cannot tell you how many times Dad said to me, "Your mother is the most wonderful woman in the world." And he meant it. In his mind, Mom could do no wrong. And Mom loved him equally. She was just so proud of the man that he was. They loved to travel. I think they've been to over 120 countries. They loved to go out to dinner. They loved to enjoy the culture that Rochester had to offer, and so many other things. But mostly, they just loved to be together. No story about my dad would be complete without talking about his 7 grandchildren. He worked so hard to build a special bond with each and every one of them. And the smile that would come to his face when one of his grandchildren walked in the room could almost bring tears to your eyes. When Dad became ill on Friday, these kids immediately came streaming in from all over the country. They loved their grandfather so much, they just wanted to be there with him. His grandson, Eitan, who is in Japan right now, couldn't make it, even though he so badly wished he could be, but he is here with us in spirit. On Saturday afternoon, we were all sitting around in the hospital room, waiting room together, and Dad was not doing great. I looked around at his loving progeny, all there together, and I guess I sort of knew that Dad's work was done. As I try to sum up my feelings today, what I would say is, I feel like the luckiest guy in the world to have had Beryl Nusbaum as my father. He was always there at my side as a father, a role model, a mentor, a confidant, and a friend. And although I won't be able to walk into his office for advice anymore, I won't be able to watch a football game with him or go out to dinner, I know with absolute certainty that he gave me everything and will be with me and the family for the rest of our lives. Dad, from the bottom of my heart, all I can say is thank you for everything and that I love you very much.
Thank you, Dina, Chad, and Mitch, for a beautiful resemblance of your beloved father. We now call upon the grandchildren, Talia, Shayna, Zach, Sam, Hannah, Dahlia, and we know that Eitan is in Japan. In spirit, he is with us. So please come forward.
Our Saba loved many things, but the thing he loved the most in the world, besides Safta, was bringing his entire family together. There was no greater happiness for Saba than the simple pleasure of seeing his children and grandchildren spending time together and telling stories of our family. When the grandkids sat down to reminisce about Saba, the first thing we all thought of was Saba's huge smile that was plastered across his face each time he saw us together. I'm sure most of you have experienced that look, the crinkly eyes, the grin from ear to ear, and the pure joy emanating from him. And those of us that have experienced true bliss. As Saba's grandchildren, we are the luckiest people in the world because we know, without a doubt, that Saba's love for us is boundless. Each of us shared a beautiful, special, and unique relationship with Saba, and he had, at the same time, a beautiful, special, and shared relationship with all of us. We are all the apples of his eye. Our Saba was a role model for us in all facets of his life, whether as a husband, father, grandfather, or community member. He was a man of integrity and a man of his word, and we are so lucky that he was always ready to pass on a bit of timely wisdom. There are 3 sayings that have stuck with us the most. The first is, if someone says that it's now or never, it's always never. The second is, if you're going to take back the garment, don't argue with the customer. And the one he said the most was this: do you know why grandparents and grandchildren get along so well? Because they have a common enemy. It's the parents. And he didn't just say those words, he embodied them. Saba gave us everything we could ever want and so much more, and he loved every second of it. When we went to restaurants, we would rush to hand Saba our pieces of bread so that he could put 3 times the amount of butter that any of our parents would ever allow us to have. We would clamor for special trips to diners, farmers markets, or baseball games, and everyone would fight over who got to sit next to Saba. He would always slip us extra treats and thought he was being so sneaky, keeping it a secret from Safta. But of course, she saw everything. Some of our most cherished memories with Saba were over the holidays, and especially Passover. He would lead the Seder with gusto, the table littered with plastic frogs and other plagues. We kids would sneak away somewhere in the middle to build forts in the basement using the dozens of massive boxes that Saba would never throw away. But we would always be back for the singing, the highlight of our year. Our family doesn't have an ounce of musical talent between us, but what we lack in ability, we make up for with heart. Our Saba, who cares deeply about tradition, always led us with pride and joy as we sang the same songs he grew up singing with his family. The Nusbaum family came to Rochester in the mid-1860s, and since then have been pillars of the Jewish community. There were few things more important to Saba than the generations of Nusbaums building their lives here. When my parents decided to move back to Rochester, Saba was ecstatic. He never failed to mention how happy he was that Zach, Hannah, and I are 6th generation Rochesterians. Having Saba and Safta just down the street changed the course of our lives. They were mainstays at our sports games and school events, were the best babysitters, and no Shabbat dinner was complete without Saba saying the Kiddush and ending the night with a huge slice of 7-layer cake. No matter where we were, Saba always took the time to tell us how much he loved us and how proud we made him. He and Safta are the grandparents of our dreams. Saba was more than just our grandfather. He was integrated into every facet of our lives, and we couldn't imagine it any other way. We love you, Saba.
Thank you, Talia, and thank you, Shayna, Zach, Sam, Hannah, Dalia, and Eitan. Most people live in a world not of their making. They are the products of circumstances beyond their control. They exist within a society dominated by its prevailing spirit, values, and character. However, there are rare individuals who, through certain qualities within themselves, succeed in creating an atmosphere, an aura around them that extends their personality. Something radiates from within them, setting a unique atmosphere and climate. The Jewish people have been blessed with many exceptional individuals, and they have shown their appreciation through a wise and beautiful legend. The legend tells us that the world exists because of 36 good, gentle, righteous people who sustain it through the way they live and the good deeds they perform. According to the legend, no one knows who belong to this special group. The individuals themselves are not aware of their powers, of their impact on others. Although we may not identify individuals among us as part of this rare company of spirits today, we recognize that some people possess a unique personality, a unique trait that creates a positive atmosphere around them and helps sustain their community. I firmly believe that Beryl Nusbaum was one of these individuals. John saw Beryl for the first time at his bar mitzvah in 1946 at the old Beth Shalom synagogue. He wasn't from there. He was a Bethel member, but his grandfather belonged there. He was 13, she was 9. And she found him intelligent. He found he was cute. And he found that he was reading the Torah with great skill. Time passed, and by the time he was in law school, while John was in college, they were finally put together for a date. It was suggested to Beryl to call on John, and he did. The following year, they were married. Chad said to me yesterday that his father had the ability to capture every situation. He was able to give that perspective that was so special and unique to him. He shared the little words of wisdom that we heard. He helped young people to handle different situations. He had an extensive knowledge of business, and he was able to inspire with the wisdom that came directly from his father, from that store, the Nusbaum department store, where he had worked since the age of 9. Mitch told me that his dad was essentially, as he expressed today, his role model, because he clearly understood right from wrong, and because he had that strong moral compass, totally confident about himself, and a great supporter and supportive person of his children. He was firm when we made mistakes, but he was also our North Star to guide us to the right path. We looked up to him. We strived not to disappoint him. Dad took immense pride in us and expected the best from each one of his children. As Mitch expressed so eloquently, the love for Joan was immense and unparalleled. He set high standards, but he allowed us to chart our own courses, our own paths, without being an overly controlling dad. Chad also added at that time that he taught his children to begin treating people with respect, that your word is valuable, that ethics and moral behavior are expected of young children. You should also present yourself truthfully and speak honestly to others. You cannot be deceptive, cruel, unfair. If you commit to do something, you must be trustworthy that you will deliver that commitment. As we heard, he was a litigator, a great lawyer. Actually, people didn't want to go against him. He was that good. He was a zealous representative of his clients. He was loyal to his clients, and his clients were loyal to him. His adversaries respected him, and he won, and he won, and he won every case. Dina recalls how within this incredible amount of work, he made time to be at home for dinner, and that was extremely important to him. It was very important for Beryl that his children will see him at home. It was also important for him, education, something he inherited from his mother. He carried that with him and wanted his children to appreciate education and be educated. Dina said he encouraged it so much that we in our family understood the importance of education that needed to be passed on to our children. Beryl said to them, you have to strive for what you want to do in life. You have to go the way you want to go. And Mom and I will help you to achieve your goals, to concretize your dreams, and he held them through. He was there for them. His own mother was almost completed for her PhD in biology. And therefore, between that love for education, Beryl synthesized that love with the hard work from his own father, Shabtai, and put those two together to be the successful, community-minded individual that he was. Our rabbis convey the profound thought to us that every person has three names. Echad shekorim lo aviv ve'imo, one that is called by his parents, his mother and father. This one is given to you at the Brit Milah or in the synagogue in a baby naming situation. This is the name registered on the birth certificate, enter on school record, on citizenship papers, and wherever the name is required. The second name is Shekorim Lo Chaverav. That name is how a person is known to family, to colleagues, and to friends in the community. This name is earned through a person's actions and relationship with others. And the third name refers to how God knows an individual. And this name represents the entirety of their life. It reflects not only their outward conduct, but also their inner life. It concerns the relationship between a person's conscience and a person's actions. It embodies the inner soul and spiritual life of an individual. And of course, that third name we cannot know. That's what God calls that person. We also cannot change the name that parents give to someone. However, we can discuss how a person's life impacts our own and the impressions they leave in our hearts as they live life. And that is the second name. Beryl left an indelible impression on his children and grandchildren. As we heard, Saba, Hebrew name given by the grandchildren to Beryl. It means grandfather in Hebrew. He was very concerned about passing on the wisdom that he had acquired. It usually came at time of breakfast. He taught his grandchildren how the world works, the importance of history, the significance of having integrity. He shared stories about his origins and how proud he was about his family name, his family, and the community of Rochester. He recounted tales back to the 1800s. As we heard, 6 generations of Nusbaum in this town. The cemetery on Britton Road, where Beryl will rest, is a cemetery where his family is buried. And there is a whole section donated by the Nusbaum family. The third thing that Beryl wanted to give to his grandchildren was very simple. Everything they desire. His mantra was to spoil the grandchildren. And he took great pleasure in seeing you happy. He loved giving you ice cream, and as we heard, the battering of the bread. Beryl also enjoys sports. He himself played tennis for many years with a great skill. Aside from that, he loved gardening. And he enjoyed doing that in his time, free and relaxing time together with you, Joan. As we heard, traveling was very important because at the beginning of his relationship, almost 70 years ago, he said to Joan, I would like to see out the world. And Joan said, what about children? Well, what about 2 weeks a year that you and I alone go on a trip? And that you get to 120 countries. You go 2 weeks a year. That traveling extended later to the children, to their spouses, eventually to the grandchildren, making the long story short, 35 people traveling together. And he enjoyed that very much. His legacy was his priority. Devoted husband, single-minded of what's right and what's wrong. He wanted to be remembered as a loving and devoted family man, as an honorable person with integrity, as a respectful individual. He wished for his extended family to emulate the values and ethics he found important. He felt proud that they understood and respected the values and traditions he brought into their lives. And this is, according to one of his grandchildren, an ongoing legacy. Beryl was president of Temple Bethel and Federation. He was a mentor to many people in this community. He and Jay Birnbaum were instrumental in running successful fundraising campaign for Temple Bethel and creating the Temple Bethel Foundation, an endowment that will allow the temple to exist and thrive for many years to come. In addition, he was instrumental in finding a home for Beth HaKnesset Sachadosh. It was known as the Nusbaum Temple. Before I came, Beryl was the shofar blower. He blew the shofar on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We know from our tradition, even when a Sefer Torah is old and worn out, so tattered that the parchment is difficult to read and can no longer be used in a synagogue, we are bound to honor it. We never throw it away. Instead, we carefully bury it, giving it the same respect that we would give to a human being who has passed away. What is true of a Sefer Torah is also true of a person. The passing of an individual does not signify the end of that person's ongoing influence on the lives of those with whom they came into contact. Their teachings and values endure in the lives of all who knew them, continuing to shape their family, their friends and acquaintances until the very end of days. The lives and deeds of Beryl continue to shape the lives of family and friends and community. And lastly, from the Talmud, from Masechet Brachot 57b, we learn 3 things restore a person's good spirits: beautiful sounds, beautiful sights, and smells. Beryl passed away during Havdalah, the ceremony that separates Shabbat from the rest of the days of the week. To put together Havdalah, we gather the wine cup, the special candle, and the besamim, the spices in that tower of metal. We smell the spices to carry the beautiful scent of Shabbat with us throughout the week ahead. Another reason for smelling the spices is that when Shabbat begins, we receive an neshama yetera, an additional soul. And this soul knows only the delights of Shabbat and gives us an idea of what a world limited to Shabbat experiences can be like. A world without strife, famine, without sadness, a world of truth and a world of peace. And that soul, that neshama yetera, departs as Shabbat ends. And we help ourselves by smelling the spices, reminding ourselves that these delightful scents will return next week. However, this time, Beryl's neshama left alongside his Shabbat neshama yetera. This week, we have said goodbye to the wonderful scent of Shabbat, and we bid also farewell to Beryl's neshama. Like every Havdalah, we hope the smell of the besamim will accompany us until next Shabbat. Similarly, we hope Beryl's influence will remain with us as long as we live. A good mentor affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence ends. Beryl Nusbaum is one of those who has affected eternity many times over. No one will ever know or measure where his benevolent influence ends. Indeed, his impact on his family and the Jewish community of Rochester will be a source of permanent blessing that will never be forgotten by the countless people of all ages whose life he touched. The hearts of many dear friends go out in profound compassion to his family, to Joan, to Mitch and Julie, to Chad and Pieli, to Dina and Dave, to Mimsy, to the grandchildren Talia, Shayna, Connor, Zach, Sam and Katie, Hannah, Dahlia, and Eitan, to Sandy and Harvey, and to Richard. May God comfort them in knowing they were the most beloved of the incomparable husband, father, brother, grandfather, and friend, who was Beryl Nusbaum. תהי נשמתו צרורה בצרור החיים. May the soul of Dov Ber ben Shavtad Yitzchak v'Tzipora Rachel be bound up in the bonds of life eternal. And let us say all together, Amen. Kindly rise now for the memorial prayer. El male rachamim shochen bamromim aמצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת דוב בר בן שבתאי יצחק וציפורה רחל שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו אנא בעל הרחמים אז תראהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר